All right, we're back with another episode of What's Up with Nick and Chuck. I'm Andy, the marketing guy from HUI, and with me, as always, I have Nick Rolfe and Chuck Schwartz.
Hey, Andy, how's it going?
Hey, guys. Today, we're going to kind of roll out a little bit of a mini-series, and we're going to talk about casters. Specifically today, we're going to talk about like the size of casters and brake options.
Yeah, so specifically, Andy, when it comes to sizes of casters, a lot of our customers are kind of at an impasse on what casters they should choose during their selection process. Now, I have a couple examples here with me today, and the examples that I have are all dual wheel casters. So as you can see, there's two wheels on either side of this caster. This one, for example, is a 3-inch caster, which from a cost impact standpoint tends to be the lesser cost option. So from a price standpoint, you know, if a target price is a very important part of the project overall, typically a smaller size caster is going to be a lot more beneficial during that selection process. So this one is a 3-inch caster. However, what we found is that it becomes very difficult for carts to pass a threshold test for IEC 60601 testing. So the majority of the carts that we manufacture at HUI are utilizing anywhere between 4 to 5-inch casters. So this one right here is actually a 4-inch caster. Then you can take and bump that up to a 5-inch caster, which we have on a lot of different things. And then also I have with me a 6-inch caster. You can see that size difference, which obviously this is a beast. It's not too often that we utilize 6-inch casters. However, there are applications that do require it. Now, sometimes it's a little bit nicer to have a larger caster like this because it's much easier to get over a threshold. However, if this does come into contact with an obstacle on the floor, whether it be a threshold or whether it be a cable, a lot of times these dual wheel casters are nice because the manufacturer would take and include a cable pusher option in between these casters. So that rides right above the floor. So that way, if it does come in contact with a power cord, it'll take and push that cable along the floor as opposed to running it over with the devices on the cart.
So size matters.
Right, definitely. Yes, size matters. And then you'll also come to find that obviously between these size difference, if you don't have a very heavy device, a smaller caster is going to be sufficient in a lot of cases. However, if you have a large video cart, for example, typically endoscopy carts tend to have a lot of devices that live on that cart, adds to a tremendous amount of weight that some of these carts can be experienced or can be presented with. That's where a larger caster like this is going to be a better alternative. However, we do find that with the rotational point being right here on this caster, that if they are positioned in the most unfavorable location during a tip, it does have the tendency to affect where that tipping point is on the cart, depending upon where the center of gravity is located.
All right.
Now, as you can see, the caster examples that I have are also all outfitted with some sort of braking mechanism that are on here. Now, Nick, could you further describe what some of those braking features are and what would make a customer choose between either a single locking caster, a directional lock caster, or not having any lock casters at all?
Absolutely, Chuck. So I got some examples here that I'll go through. Sometimes when you look at casters that have locks like this on the top side of the caster versus casters that have locks more towards the center of the wheel, right? Part of the reason why people do that is from a design standpoint, an ease of use of getting to the lock with their foot. Sometimes it's easier to have it more in the center of the caster like that, and versus the top side of the caster like you see here. So some of it's got to do with access. The other part where the reason for the brake being in a specific location sometimes has to do with the geometry of the base. So for example, a caster like this, where the brake is more centered than the backside of the wheel, it's easier to access that. Now, there are going to be times where the brake at the top side makes sense because it's easier for the user to access the brake on top. Now, there are different ways that brakes work. So like, for example, we've got a brake like this, where when it's engaged, it engages more from more like a tab, okay? Where in the case of this caster, okay, the brake actually is a full like lever sort of action, if you kind of can get a picture of what I'm showing right there. I got another caster here that acts very similar to that, where it's more like a lever action, okay? This is made by Tente, so you can see that, again, in this case, the brake is more on the back side of the wheel, where the action is easier to access. Now, this is a very popular caster at HUI that we get from Shepherd, and this has just a small little tab on it from a braking standpoint that engages. Very cost-effective caster. The part that where brakes come into play is the bigger the caster or the more expensive casters or the casters that are a little bit more technical, they tend to brake easier. So that meaning that the brake itself engages and it locks better. So for example, this is more of an internal brake on this Steinco caster. On this Shepherd caster, if you can see, the brake actually acts on the back side of the tab, so causing the brake to function well, but under heavy loads, we find that a caster like this, where the brake is on the outside like that, sometimes those casters are going to allow more leniency in the wheel motion when it's engaged. So you could have in certain circumstances on the threshold or the tip test or the threshold test, I'm sorry, where the caster is going to allow some creep. As far as from a braking standpoint, we also find that there's going to be times where people ask us, hey, can we put 2 locking casters on? Can we put 3 on? And maybe you've got a 5 caster base or a 4 caster base, and you want to know how many brakes do I need to have engaged at one time? Well, a lot has to do with how heavy the load is on the cart. So if you've got a cart that's got like an endoscopy cart that's got a 4-wheel caster, a base with 4 casters on it, we tend to find that in certain circumstances that you're going to need to have all 4 casters that are lockable. And a lot has to do with how heavy the device is.
Do you want to talk about like user error on the brakes? Like that's how casters get broken, is if you're riding the brakes or forget about the brakes or the storing with the brakes on?
That's a great point, Andy. So the point Andy asked me is what happens when we engage a brake, right? And we forget to take it off, or we leave the brake on too long. And so when you look at this style of caster, right, where the brake engages into the wheel like this Genesis caster from Shepherd, sometimes what happens is when this is engaged for a long period of time and it's left on, sometimes what'll happen is you'll create an indent in there, and that's where you get the when it's rolling down the the hallway. The other time is that when we find that if you don't have all 4 wheel, like if we got a base with 4 casters on it, and you engage all 4, it's going to really lock that cart down. But if you go to a cart that, let's just say it's only got 2 wheels engaged with brakes, you still can move that cart to a certain degree, and you'll end up developing flat spots on those wheels, or over time, you'll end up just wearing out that brake.
And I guess another point to clarify too, Andy, is that when we refer to a locking caster, we say that when the lock is applied like this, it's down. That means that the wheels cannot rotate. And then when it's referred to as a directional locking caster, that means that when the lock is applied, that the rotation is limited as well. So you can see that there's that tab that comes up, interacts with those splines on there, and then that limits the rotation around the pivot point of the base.
So for our conversation today, what we're talking about from a locking standpoint, it's purely on brakes, and we'll talk about the mechanisms in when to use directional locking casters in another episode. But as far as for like Chuck said, yes, and all of that is typically in the brake, in the same lever as the brake is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess if the viewers have any specific questions regarding casters, if you want to take and put a note, drop a note in the comments section, or reach out to us to let us know if you have any specific questions in regards to casters, we'd be happy to address those.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for that. That was a lot of great information on casters. Like Chuck said, if you guys do have any questions that you'd like them to further elaborate on casters or anything like that, please leave us a comment underneath our video, and we'll definitely get back to you or make a video and put it out there to further answer those questions. So until our next episode, thanks for watching, and everybody stay safe. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks a lot,
See you
Andy.
at the next.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.